So AI has claimed another victim. Today, Micron has announced that it is killing off the crucial line of their business, the crucial consumer business. So you read through this announcement and everybody can see what's happened. Basically, AI demand for RAM is through the roof and there's not enough to go around. And Micron has decided in order to fulfill demand on the AI data center side, Crucial has to die. So here you can see the AI-driven growth in the data center has led to a surge in demand for memory and storage. Micron has made the difficult decision to exit the Crucial consumer business in order to improve supply and support for our larger strategic customers in faster-growing segments. So listen, a lot of people are upset about this, and rightly so. I mean, look, RAM is a very expensive product right now. And that is directly due to the fact that to run these big AI models, you have to have a ton of RAM, and there's a ton of money there, so all the RAM is being sucked up into AI. But for Micron specifically, I figured it'd be useful at least to take a look and to show people the numbers and what's going on and why they made this decision, and frankly why it makes some sense even if we don't like it. It does make sense. So the devil's in the details. Let's take a look at them. We're over here in Micron's 10K, and so we'll show you what happened this past year to Micron's business and why basically they kind of have to do this or else they're stupid. So Micron is organized into four main business segments. You got cloud memory, core data center, mobile and client, and automotive and embedded. So for this particular product, Crucial, that sits in the mobile and client business unit, or the MCBU. So later, they actually talk about the industry conditions. What's the state of the RAM manufacturing market? So they say, look, AI-driven demand is accelerating and is outpacing industry supply. There's just not enough to satisfy demand. And in 2025, we benefited from substantial improvements in DRAM pricing. Now, a lot of people have talked about the DRAM market is kind of a commodity market, and basically these producers are beholden to whether or not people really need more DRAM. And in the past, it's caused a lot of volatility in their earnings. But right now, DRAM is in high demand, and so prices are very high. And so they've made a lot of money in the past year. So during 2025, we shifted a portion of our DRAM supply to data center and hyperscale cloud markets to meet the strong demand fueled by AI. Again, it's just point blank, it is AI that has caused this. So it says that resulted in a revenue mix weighted more prominently toward segments experiencing higher growth. And that leads them to shift supply because, again, this is a constrained resource. DRAM doesn't just drop out of the sky. They can't just snap their fingers and make more. And so when demand has shot up, they can't just increase supply that quickly. We'll get to more of that later when we talk about the volatility in DRAM suppliers' revenues, but that's basically what's going on. This past year, they've shifted supply over out of the consumer market already, and this shows up in their numbers. If you look at the revenue by business unit, you see the CMBU has shot up. Now, the CMBU, just to remind you, is the cloud memory business unit, and that's the hyperscale cloud customers, high bandwidth memory, data center stuff, right? So the CMBU, that segment has blown up, went through the roof this year. So historically, the cloud market, right, this big data center market, 12% of revenues in 2023, 15% of revenues 2024, a healthy 3.8 billion, but really the smallest segment of their business. So then 2025, 13.5 billion. It is now in 1 year went from being their smallest business segment to being the biggest business segment. 1 year. While this thing just blew up, what happened to the consumer side? So that mobile, that MCBU unit, went from 48% of their revenue in 2023, 46% of their revenue in 2024, 32%, and it barely changed year over year. And the reason why is, well, they shifted all the product over for the cloud business because, well, that's where the money is. And again, let's show you where the money is. So that was revenue, but look at the operating income. What you see is Again, they barely made money in 2024. They lost money multiple segments in 2023. Overall, the company lost $3.8 billion in 2023. Now you go to 2025, $6 billion from that cloud segment alone. And again, you look at the overall operating income. And again, this is operating income. This isn't net profit, but almost 11 billion overall, and over half of that just coming from cloud. So when you look at the margins, this is where it really just shows you what they had to do. So this cloud market, 45% operating margins. The consumer market, 17%. So you're looking at almost 3 times as much operating margin by moving this RAM over to the other channel. So this is what happened. If you're able to sell your product and make 3 times as much money for the same thing in one market, and that market is like an endless well of demand where you can throw every bit of product you have and make 3 times as much money, yeah, you aren't going to keep pursuing a market that isn't making you as much money. And so this is basically why Crucial's dead. Crucial was not making them the money. The growth wasn't there. The margins weren't there. And so that's what's happened. Now with this, I do also want to point out the volatility in this market. People are always going to say, well, why not just make more RAM? Right? If supply is a problem, just fix the problem. Just make more RAM. And this is where you have to understand the DRAM market is very volatile. And Micron goes through phases where they make a lot of money and everybody gets mad because prices are high. But then they will go through these valleys where they just get their ass kicked. Because if demand falls off, what are you going to do? You've got all this DRAM available and your manufacturing capacity is what it is. So you've already paid for the manufacturing capacity. If people don't want your product at that point, you're screwed. So this makes them very conservative in expansion because if you go too far, you just lose a ton of money. And this shows up if you look back at 2023. This was a bad market and Micron lost a ton of money, right? $3 billion in the consumer segment on $7 billion worth of sales. So yeah, that means that they sold $7 billion in revenue. It cost them over $10 billion to make that product basically. So they lost a ton of money, and this isn't unusual in the DRAM market. And so I know this is probably something you've heard if you're interested in, RAM and the current crisis going on with that, but DRAM is a volatile market, and here are Micron's trailing 12 months earnings. And again, this is net income over the past 15 years-ish. It's, I guess, going back to 2012, so 13 years. And what you see is this very cyclical pattern of ups and downs. And so, if you go back to 2013, Micron was just losing money, and then they make money through like 2014. And then you go into 2015 and they lose money again. And then you go into the late 2010s, and so this is where a lot of the cryptocurrency market started bouncing up, and there was a lot more demand for computing, and consumer stuff kind of blew up then, and you see a big rise then. The DRAM market was pretty tight, so prices were high. Then it drops during COVID, and again, you've got some pretty lean quarters there for a bit, then a post-COVID bump, and then it fell off a cliff, and like I said, they really got hammered during 2023. Late 2022, the market kind of dipped in 2022. A lot of capex dried up, and you see like the market for DRAM was abysmal, and they just lost their butt. And now they're back to just crushing it, making a ton of money. And so when people get mad at these companies for not doing what they want, not just creating endless supply of product, you have to understand this is why. Yes, when times are good, they're real good. When times are bad, they're real bad. And that makes these companies very risk averse because the risk is very heavy. When things go well, they do well. But when things go bad, they're getting crushed during these bad years. And so if they spin up and really try to crush it going forward and they're wrong, they lose billions of dollars, right? Again, multiple billions of dollars in losses. And so, yeah, right now, people are all mad. Why don't they just make more RAM? Well, this is why. You make a bunch of RAM, and then if there's a glut, because everybody kicks out a bunch of RAM, and then everybody just loses. Now, there's also price fixing. There's other stuff going on. I'm not saying that that's not. But as much as this sucks, I just wanted to point out there are reasons why this stuff happens, and this is why, right? Everybody knows what's going on. It is AI's fault. Maybe it's a bubble, maybe it's not, but the money is what it is right now, and Micron is in a pickle because there's not enough product to go around and they have to play favorites. And people building AI data centers, they're the favorite right now. They're willing to pay way more than any consumer is for this product, DRAM. And that's why Crucial is going away. Now, Micron is still going to sell to the commercial market. And so some people who use Micron chips, you probably still going to see that out there in RAM sticks made by other vendors and stuff, but the Crucial stuff's not going to be there, and obviously supply is going to be tight. So prices are going to go up. I imagine SSDs are probably going to get more expensive too. It's going to suck. It's going to suck until all this comes and gets unscrewed, and who knows how that's going to be. All the forecasts say it could be years. So times are tight, and it's going to be a rough time over the next year or two to build any sort of PCs. And I mean, you look at like the Steam Deck launching, and that thing's probably going to cost way more than anybody wants it to, if nothing else, just because of RAM. So anyway, that's it. Just wanted to point out and walk through the numbers a little bit and kind of, you know, show you, hey, yeah, it does unfortunately kind of make sense. So anyway, that's it. If you got feedback, comments, suggestions, criticisms, you want to rant and fight down in the comments, feel free. Appreciate it as always.